39 of the House of Commons on national defense. Pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, February 23rd, 2026, the committee is meeting to study the impact of the defense industrial strategy. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format. Before we begin, I ask participants to consult the guidelines on the table. These measures are there to help prevent audio feedback incidences and to protect the health and safety of our interpreters. And as a reminder to the witnesses and members, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking by raising your hand. I also remind witnesses that the committee members may ask questions in either French or English. And if you need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the appropriate channel. And for purposes of decorum and so forth, I ask that all comments be addressed through the chair. So let's begin. I would like to welcome the Secretary of State and our witnesses. The Honorable Stephen Fuhrer, Secretary of State for Defense Procurement. From the Defense Investment Agency, Vincent Robitaille, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Procurement. Diogo Brandao, the Senior Director of Policy and Engagement. And Paula Folks from the Department of Public Works and Government Services, the Associate Assistant Deputy Minister. We'll proceed now with opening statements of up to 5 minutes. Secretary of State, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Bonjour à tous. C'est un grand plaisir.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today.
We're gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The defense industrial strategy is built on a simple idea. Defense and economic security are mutually reinforcing. The geopolitical assumptions that shaped Canada's defense and industrial policies for decades no longer hold. By strengthening the operational readiness of the Canadian Armed Forces, we can also strengthen Canadian industry, support innovation, create good jobs, and build greater resilience here at home. To achieve these objectives, the Defense Industrial Strategy introduced a new Build, Partner, Buy framework. Through the Defense Investment Agency, we are applying this framework by building in Canada where practical, partnering with trusted allies where collaboration strengthens capability and industrial participation, and acquiring proven systems when speed and operational requirements demand it. Let me begin with operational readiness, the first area examined by your committee. The Canadian Armed Forces requires modern equipment delivered at the speed of relevance. The capabilities identified in Our North Strong and Free remain critical to Canada's security, but the pace of technological and geopolitical change has increased the importance of delivering them sooner. Over the past year, we've accelerated the delivery of a number of key capabilities for the Canadian Armed Forces. For instance, we've accelerated the Canadian Modular Assault Rifle program by approximately 2 years. We've accelerated Canada's submarine replacement program and most recently advanced Canada's airborne early warning and control capability, a key enabler for both NORAD and NATO operations. Together, these initiatives are helping ensure that the Canadian Armed Forces receive the capabilities they need faster while strengthening Canada's ability to sustain and evolve these capabilities over time. Canada's defence industry is another key area examined by your committee. The strategy aims to increase the share of defence acquisitions awarded to Canadian firms to 70% over the next decade, while increasing defence exports by 50%. This is already being reflected in the DIA procurements that we've done. The Canadian Modular Assault Rifle program is built here in Canada and supported by approximately 80% Canadian supply chain, and Colt is already supporting allied demand, including exports to Denmark. Canadian-built Bombardier Global 6500 aircraft to provide airlift capability here in Canada as well. This supports domestic aerospace manufacturing, engineering, and sustainment. And the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project is placing significant emphasis on Canadian in-service support and supply chain participation. Innovation is also central to the defense industrial strategy. The selection of SAB as a preferred supplier to provide airborne early warning and control is a strong example of this. It delivers significant Canadian industrial participation from the outset, while allowing Canada to participate in spiral development of those systems over time. This also creates an opportunity for Canada to develop and export a finished AEWC capability to allied partners allied partner nations, a key defense industrial strategy objective of increasing Canadian defense exports. By bringing more of the missionization and system integration work back to Canada, the project supports high-value jobs and sovereign expertise here at home. This approach helps ensure interoperability with allies while creating long-term opportunities for Canadian innovation, expertise, excuse me, and industrial participation. The final area identified by the study is the creation of jobs here in Canada. The Defence Industrial Strategy is expected to generate up to 125,000 new jobs across Canada, and we're already seeing evidence of that impact through the growing production capacity, investment, and hiring across Canada's defence aerospace sectors. As an example, I was told by Colt Canada they were going to have to double their employee workforce to meet the demand of the Canadian order plus the Denmark order, and I'm sure there's more coming for that great company in Southern Ontario. Mr. Chair, the Defence Industrial Strategy is not simply about buying equipment. It's about providing capability for the Canadian Armed Forces while building out capacity for Canada. Through the Build, Partner, Buy framework, we are strengthening readiness, supporting Canadian industry, and encouraging innovation while creating jobs here at home in Canada. Merci. Je suis prêt à répondre à vos questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm ready to answer your questions.
Appreciate the opening remarks. We're going to proceed with 6-minute round. Mr. Bazan, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks the Secretary of State for joining us today for at least the first hour. You mentioned the Saab Global Eye. Is this considered a sole source contract?
Well,
you called it a preferred supplier, but there's other options out there.
I will answer your question, but we're here to talk about the Defence Industrial Strategy, and I did bring it up. So
yeah.
Right now, the DIA is negotiating with Saab as a preferred supplier. So we're in pretty early stages of this procurement.
So there's no longer a competition?
There's no longer, well, we're negotiating with Saab as a preferred supplier.
When do you expect the contract to be signed?
I'd probably pass that over to you, Diego. It's pretty early stages, Mr. Brazan. We just announced it at CANSEC, as you know.
So you said, though, that you're speeding up the timeline. Originally in the Defense Capabilities Blueprint, AWACS were supposed to start delivering around 2037. You're ahead of that or on schedule?
Well, we're ahead of it. And if you look at the Our North Strong and Free, there's timelines and capabilities all in that. That's a couple of years old. A lot has changed in 2 years, like the entire planet is different than it was 2 years ago. That was a policy update to
You need to update the defense policy again.
Well,
because it should be an evergreen policy, right?
Well, I mean, we had a defense policy from 2017, and then we had an update, and these things they happen from time to time. But what I'm saying is, the last update we had 2 years ago, Our North Strong and Free, significant changes have occurred, and we're pulling lots of capability forward. Subs is another good example of that.
So who's responsible then to talk about the interoperability of the Saab Global Eye with our own F-35s that we're going to be receiving, along with our NORAD partners? He brought up the Global Eye. This is definitely in order.
Can you wait for a point of order?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And respectfully, I think we're getting into the weeds of procurement. My understanding of the study that we have in front of us today is that it's in relation to the Defence Industrial Strategy. So I'd hate for us to steer from that topic, which I think is incredibly important.
Mr. Chair, if I may respond to that point of order?
Yes, you may, Mr. Bazan.
And I hope you have the pause on the clock. The witness, being the Secretary of State, brought up procurement and brought up particular platforms, including the modular new firearm, the subs, and the AWACS planes. So he's brought up what they're doing, and part of the Defense Industrial Strategy is also talking about getting stuff for our Canadian Armed Forces. That's first and foremost our responsibility here at this committee. I think that we are masters of our own domain, and since this has already been brought up by the witness, I think it's in line to ask the questions.
Noted, and we do have a motion for us to discuss the DIS. That is the topic of discussion. So let's try to keep it on track. Mr. Vice Chair, let's proceed, please.
Okay, and I believe that the Secretary of State is a seasoned parliamentarian, especially at this committee. He does need to be protected by his colleagues. I know that he's more than capable to answer the questions. So if we are talking about interoperability under NORAD, who's responsible to ensure that things like having access to NORAD's Link 16 Net 4 Special Access Aerospace Control and Guidance Unit is going to be available to the platforms that you're going to be procuring?
Well, I think this came up in committee the last time I was here, and it's no secret. The Defense Department writes the requirements for the things that they need. We have a build, partner, buy strategy that we're applying to that. So, I mean, that's what's happening.
Okay, so part of the defense industrial strategy is standing up the DIA, and there is Division 16 in the Budget and Implementation Act that just passed second reading on division, I might add, but that it provides some incredible powers to the minister who is yet to be named for the Defense Investment Agency. So when you start looking at the ability to exempt people from competing or companies from competing in the procurement process, is that how the government plans on tilting the playing field in favor of their preferred suppliers?
I don't think so at all. I mean, sole source has always been a way any government, including yours, who tried to sole source the F-35, ironically, it's always existed.
But at the same time, sole source under the rules still has to go.
All this, and if you look at the four ways you could sole source something under the previous rules or the existing rules until this passes, there's some pretty broad subjectivity on the ways that you can do things there. All this does is add clarity to that. So the government of Canada, whether it be conservative, liberal, in the past, in the future, has always had the ability to sole source. There's some more clarity in the bill, that's my opinion, that if they decide to do it for whatever the reasons, they have to justify it.
So under this bill, oh crap, somebody's trying to call me. Under this bill, though, under Bill C-31, Division 16, you are given all sorts of powers, or the minister, whoever is yet to be named or designated, because it could be anybody within cabinet that can be designated to take care of the DIA. So you also have powers to take over corporations, buying shares, taking over, replacing boards, executive members, officers of a corporation. Sounds like nationalization to me.
Well, now it sounds like we want to have a committee meeting on Bill 31, Division 16, because we're really in the weeds here.
It's going to be done through the Finance Committee, unfortunately. It's not going to happen here. We got you here now, and we're talking about defense industrial strategy, which DIA is going to be a major part of. You're going to be, whoever whether it's U.S. Secretary of State now or a minister in the future, is going to have the ability to, up to $1 billion without even having to go through cabinet.
I think what you're drilling at here, Mr. Zan, is accountability, and I agree with you. But let me just say, like any other department that exists now, there is still all the accountability still exists. There's Parliament, there is this committee, there's the Auditor General, there's a PBO. None of that stuff goes away. So all we've done is we've created an agency to do manage that. One of the biggest complaints about military procurement, which your committee identified back in November of 2024, which is it's too slow. It cannot deliver
I'll say
on
this.
time.
The danger in what's laid out in this Defense Investment Agency Act, is that it gives the power to hide behind national security of not releasing that information to the public of why people are exempt. There is actually a clause in there that provides it out for the minister of why, without explaining why somebody didn't receive an opportunity
to
compete under the competition
revelation
clause. So
is
people are going to
that
get
national security exemption has existed. It exists now.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'm out of time anyway.
Out of time, but
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Proceed, Ms.
For the sake of the interpreters, I would ask that we allow the witness to answer a question and not talk over the witness, so that I could actually hear what the witness is saying. Thank you.
Point well taken. Mr. Anderson.
I believe the witness is speaking over the question, not the
I
other way
think we're
around.
speaking over each other, unfortunately. But Mr. Fuhrer, thank you very much. Mr. Vice Chair, over to you. Ms. Sudds, you have 6 minutes. And welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And wonderful to be with you here today. My question is for the minister. Through your testimony, we heard about the need to build up our defense industrial base here within Canada. So I'm wondering if you can speak to how the defense industrial strategy will strengthen our domestic defense industrial base, while at the same time, of course, ensuring that the Canadian Armed Forces are receiving the capabilities that they need.
Thanks very much. I think if we just look what's going on around the world right now, we've seen a number of conflicts that we thought would end quickly that just didn't, and there's no signs of them ending quickly. Certainly one of them is for sure in that state. So what I think all could admit and agree to is that we need to persist. We have to have the ability to persist in conflicts should we get ourselves into one. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but we have to be ready to be prepared to defend our sovereignty, obviously. And supply chain resilience is a big part of that persistence. You can have integrated supply chain resilience with partners. You can have much better, personal, sovereign supply chain resilience. Canada has amazing capacity and capability, probably much more than we've ever appreciated before. So we want to engage in that supply chain resilience, not only to help us, build out be more reliant or more resilient and less reliant on others, but to create good paying jobs and careers for Canadians. And whether it's shipbuilding or aerospace, those are big ones, but the small to medium-sized enterprises in this country are unbelievable. And there is a ton they have to offer, and we need to ensure that we get them into our supply chains where we can. And this document, the Defense Industrial Strategy, really is a roadmap to do it. Now, some of the initiatives are shared, like, for example, DISH and Borealis. Those are Defense Department initiatives, but they're still helpful. Build, partner, buy, from the DIA perspective, is how we can help bring these other companies in as we move forward. So this document, first of its kind, I think we've talked about this before, maybe even in the House, is the roadmap to help. There is absolutely no way that we're going to meet the KPIs in this document without bringing SMEs into the conversation, and more than the conversation, bringing them into the process. It has to happen. They represent 93% of our companies in this space and 40% of the workforce. So they are critical to making sure that we do this big economic pivot and give our great defense and security companies a chance to participate.
Incredible. Thank you for that. And I can attest, even in my own riding of Canada, it's been remarkable to see the small, medium-sized businesses that are raising their hand, a lot more on the dual-use technology side, but really leaning in and engaging on defense and the opportunities ahead of us. And it's quite a moment, frankly, within that community. One of the pieces that I think about, and historically I think we've had some challenges around, is ensuring that, and I'll refer back to the SMEs again, small, medium-sized businesses, that they're building what the CAF needs, right? So that communication line between industry, between government and the CAF, to ensure that there's that ongoing dialogue and connection as to where we're headed. So can you speak to how the DIS helps, I assume, or is helping to connect those dots?
Well, I can. With the document specifically, there's sovereign capabilities listed out in the document. I believe there's 10. I think that's a pretty good indicator of where Canada plans to build capacity. So if I was, and I used to be a small business owner myself in this space, I would be looking at where Canada plans to do more in the 10 areas that are identified in the DIS. But as I was talking to just a few minutes ago with your colleague, the defense policy and the defense investment plan are also very important documents to signal to industry where we're going. So they, if they want to lead turn investing in themselves and or get involved between the three documents, the defense policy, I guess in this case an update, because that's what we're working with now, our North Strong and Free, the defense plan, and then the defense industrial strategy are very good indicators. Plus, I would say this, we have really done a lot of work with being available to industry. I take, and not just me, all our colleagues take a ton of meetings with industry to make sure they know what's going on, and that will not stop. That will continue to make sure that small to medium-sized businesses know what's going on.
Thank you for that. And I know I don't have much time left, but I think one of the pieces that the Defense Industrial Strategy has put forward is just creating that certainty for companies, as you've outlined, the sovereign capabilities that are listed. To me, those 10 sovereign capabilities are a blueprint for industry. So just that certainty, I think, is a game changer. I don't believe I have time left, but appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you. Monsieur Simard, welcome, and you have up to 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure that the Secretary of State is getting interpretation rather than my rough voice. Okay, perfect. Well, Secretary, I had a recent discussion with your colleague, Carlos Leitao, about the agency, because we're trying to see how people from the mining industry could get access to these opportunities, aluminum sector as well. Now, with the creation of this agency, you are trying to provide a framework for the supply chain and create a value chain. But of course, there are realities, which are complex realities. Now, in your document, I can see a willingness to rechannel aluminum production that could be used for government contracts. And I come from Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, where we have significant aluminum production. And unfortunately, the government doesn't really distinguish between primary aluminum production and the further processing of the primary aluminum. So when you have primary aluminum, you need to treat it in certain ways to process it. And in Quebec, we're not supporting these companies. They are disappearing, unfortunately, with the tariffs. So if you want to use aluminum, then you would need to send it to the States so that they are processed, so that at the end we can get sheets or whatever other form the aluminum will be used in for military purposes. Only then will it be able to integrate it into this value chain. So that, to me, is a challenge, because you need to be mindful of the fact that we don't have a functioning industrial system to respond to the needs you have outlined in Quebec or in Canada elsewhere. So that leaves me a little confused with regard to the role of the agency, because it is, these are good wishes, but how are you going to implement all of these or turn them into a reality? It's a big challenge. Are you going to specifically identify different sectors, different activities sectors? But there are challenges in some of these sectors. Are you aware of these?
Very much. We are all very aware. Steel and aluminum, auto, softwood, those are the ones we hear over and over in the House, because it's true. Those sectoral tariffs are very, very damaging to our economy. On defense procurement, where we can, I'll use steel and aluminum both. Like steel is a good example. We're building armored vehicles here. We're building ships here. You need very specific type of steel for that. And we're trying to get some of our big steel producers to pivot. The same is with aluminum, aircraft aluminum. We have de Havilland, we have Bombardier, we have some big aircraft manufacturers here. We're trying to see if there's an opportunity for Canada for them to source some of their material from Canada. But again, the aluminum they need may not be exactly what's being produced. I think the bigger opportunity here is the Buy Canada strategy, which is all the building that we're going to be doing across the country, and it's significant. The government of Canada will be buying Canadian materials, steel, aluminum, lumber. That's probably the quickest relief I think you'll see for the aluminum sector. There may be other. I know the government's also looking for other markets to get our aluminum. And obviously, I think the U.S. will come to terms with they need us for aluminum. Hopefully that happens sooner rather than later.
Je comprends tout à fait et je suis d'accord avec vous. Il faut développer.
I fully understand that, and I agree with you. We need to be developing local consumption strategies. Now, if there's a Buy Canadian policy, even though I'm a sovereignist, I would be in favor of that. But we still need to be aware of the realities of these different sectors. When I read this document, the impression I get is that you do not understand the dynamics of the aluminum industry, because what's happening as we speak is that you take primary aluminum, yes, but we are not able to process it in Canada or in Quebec. So the majority of the amount of aluminum that we end up consuming is actually exported to the U.S. first. So we don't even have the facilities to create aluminum sheet. So if you are going to take defense initiatives that would need aluminum, you actually will not have the industrial base that would supply you what's needed. Of course, there's this agency that is in place to coordinate contracts with SMEs, etc., but they seem to be not aware of the industrial structure we have in some sectors. That is why, before the establishment of the agency, maybe we need to know about our strengths and our weaknesses. The same applies to the mining industry. Before a lithium mine becomes operational, you will need to wait for years. So it's not immediate. So you cannot set up an industrial base that quickly. So what will it really look like? In my opinion, these challenges will be spread over many years to come. And I think it's a very optimistic view of things. This is not a personal comment to you directly, but it seems to be the case when it comes to the supply chain in Canada.
I know, I understand what you're saying, and let me add a couple things here. Just like steel, our need for steel in armored vehicles or ships, ice-breaking ships, we don't necessarily have that type of steel here. I guess it's analogous to what you're describing as, hey, we do have aluminum here, but it's not the type that we can use, so we send it someplace else. In the second hour, there'll be somebody here from ISED. The reason I bring that up is because there's something called the Strategic Investment Fund. This fund of money is to help companies pivot. So if what was working before these tariffs came in is not working now, and we need to change the way they do things so they can compete and they can get into procurement in Canada, this is, this is not my department, but this type of money does exist out there to help companies specifically do these types of things so, we can keep everybody working here in Canada.
Merci, Monsieur Simard. Monsieur Furrier.
Thank you, Mr. Simard.
We are going to you for 5 minutes now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the Secretary. You spoke of technological advancements at the speed of relevance. What steps has your agency taken to implement NATO's Rapid Adoption Action Plan? As you know, RAP is the NATO collective strategy designed to close the gap between rapid commercial technology cycles and slow military procurement timelines. And that aims to integrate the dual-use technology you spoke of into the Allied armed forces within 24 months. So what steps have you taken there?
Well, we're picking up our pace here at home with regard to how we procure things here in Canada. As you know, we've signed up to SAFE, which is another NATO initiative. And I think the good news about SAFE is not only Canada the only non-EU country that's involved in this, other than the EU ones that are in it. It gives us access of up to 80% of a procurement.
Oh, okay, thank you. But that's not a part of RAP, and that's getting things going faster. But could you provide one example of procurement that is actually has adopted this strategy to close the gap between the rapid technology cycles and the slow procurement process of the military?
Well, right now, as you may know, I'm sure you've looked at the DIA's website, we have 8 procurements. We will be getting all the procurements. We don't have them yet. So we're working with the procurements that we have. And I would argue, as you heard from the people that were here, because I watched a committee meeting on Monday, we're moving quickly.
So if you've held any prize-based competitions for the SMEs you spoke of, how has your agency optimized pathways for integrating new technological products into military settings for technology adoption?
Well, in this document, you'll see Borealis and Dish. I think those probably are the pathways that you're talking about. That's a D&D initiative. Obviously, this is the other problem. We're slow. We're too slow. So before, slow meant late and expensive. Now it means late, expensive, and irrelevant. So there's a whole host of things in this document. Not all of them are DIA initiatives. I would say Dish and Borealis are very good examples of how we're going to bring technology. We're going to have to do all sorts of things. We're going to have to make sure that we have a evolving supply chain here because technology is changing so quickly.
So what has your agency been doing to de-risk new technological products to be battle ready?
We buy things off the shelf and we spiral develop them. We get them quickly. Ones that exist, we make sure that they have extra power and cooling and space so we can spiral develop them moving forward, or we could do it the old way, which is just buy something and reiterate it a million times, Canadianize it and wait 10 years to get it. We're not doing that anymore.
So you de-risk it by buying off the shelf?
Well, that's one way we can
Other than
de-risk
drones, what would you give an example?
Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, we could speak about
No, we'll have answers from you in the second hour.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, strategic partnerships are a good example of that. So we have a strategic partnership with CAE for Future Fighter Lead and Training. We have a strategic partner with MDA Telesat. Now, the whole point of getting involved with companies early on is let the experts of these companies help us figure out how to go fast and not make mistakes and not waste money. Those are two good examples of that.
Okay, so what steps has the DIA taken to build the capacity to have critical mineral extraction done in Canada?
Right now, that's with natural resources. So again, right now, today, we're a special operating agency inside PSPC. We will be a standalone agency, as we all know through this, but critical minerals aren't on our plate yet, but I suspect they will be, but they are not there now.
Has the DIA provided a timeline with budget allocation amounts on the procurements you're responsible for to show what the DIA is going to contribute towards what NATO is asking all members for, and that's the 5% by 2035?
I will tell you that our 2% was sanctioned by NATO.
We have no plan that's before us.
No, I'm just saying that because there was some people going, hey, we just self-declared. I've seen in the South, we just self-declared 2%. That's not true. We met our 2% obligation. NATO agrees with our accounting and what we've done. So to your question, going from 2% to 5%, I would have to turn to the official to find out exactly.
Okay, so you don't have the timeline with you at the moment.
No.
So how is your agency addressing the urgent need for robotics and cyber weaponry?
We're engaging with the industry to find out what capability exists in Canada, first and foremost, and there's a lot of it. AI, robotics, quantum. Canada's a leader in all those spaces.
Okay, that's finding out about it, but how are you actually turning that into action so our soldiers have what they need in theater?
Well, again, it's Department of National Defense that writes the requirements, right? So we
don't have the requirements
No,
yet.
we work with them. They identify what they need. We go through something called options analysis, which we'll be involved in, to make sure that the build, partner, buy strategy is applied. But at the end of the day, the requirements exist in the Department of National Defense. So what you're describing is exactly what they're up to.
Thank you, Mr. Fuhr. Ms. Glant, appreciate that. Mr. Millett, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for being here, Secretary Fuhr. In my riding of the Bay of Quinte, we've been quite proud recently of examples of some SMEs that have been actually getting contracts that they thought they may have been unable to do. And a small but innovative company by the name of Cool Coatings was able to secure a business with General Dynamics, providing a niche application for its mil-spec certified powder coating for one of General Dynamics' product lines in a defense application. And for a company that of the size of this, and it's quite inspirational to see it, this company believes that this is an opportunity that the company could lead to additional contracts in the future with, GD or others. My question then for you, Mr. Fuhr, is in your estimation, does this type of success story reflect the goals of the DIS? And what steps is the government taking to ensure more Canadian SMEs like Cool Coatings can connect with major defense contractors and participate in defense supply chains? Because I think it's a great example of how integrated we can be in providing our Canadian SMEs with a chance to access these larger companies like General Dynamics.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, like I said earlier, it's critical for us to do this, not only for our economy, but for our resilience. If we want supply chain resilience in Canada to support our Canadian Armed Forces, we need to make sure all these small companies, especially like the ones you described, are known about and can participate. If I was to go through this document, I would point out a couple of things. It removes a lot of barriers, and I speak from experience here because I used to operate in this space. One of the barriers was just communication with the government. These SMEs have no chance of figuring out, or the resources of figuring out who to talk to. Big primes even struggle with this. So the communication with the government is at an all-time high. I know because I deal with them all the time. And then there was some pretty positive feedback from the group of folks that you had here on Monday. I watched the committee meeting, and they were pretty happy with the way things were. So communication, that's key, and that happens right at the beginning. Fiscal supports for SMEs in particular are challenging. You just couldn't get money from anywhere. It's like, unless you're going to a venture capital place and get prepared to pay 12, 13, 15%, they can't do that all the time. So there's a whole bunch of initiatives in financing that have come about. They're identified in there. BDC got, I think it's a total of about $6 billion. The RD, Regional Development Agencies, got about, I think, $350 million. NRC got some money. So financing for these small to medium-sized companies is a lot more prevalent than it was before. Security clearances, I'm not sure that powder coating would necessarily be in that space, but it is an issue. These small businesses that want to work in the space need to have security clearances, and then they need to have a place to work. You can't have these conversations at the Starbucks. So all these things have been addressed there. Some other things that we've just taken on, or we've done since we've been running, is introducing small companies to big primes. I took 25 companies with me to South Korea. I took 15 with me to Germany, Norway when I went. It was smaller because it was just before Christmas. To give them these on subs, pick any, even AEWC, these companies will have billions of dollars in ITB obligations to Canada. Now, they could buy $100 million worth of rubber boots, but we don't necessarily want that. We want to direct that fiscal resource to this, to where Canada wants that money to go, and we can incentivize that through a point system to make sure that the money coming back is going to the places that actually matter to our supply chain, and we'll certainly do that. And one other thing, really quickly, because not a lot of people are talking about this, but it's going to happen. All the ISED stuff, all the ITB policy will be transferred to the DIA when this agency stood up as a department. Now, what does that do? You truly have one-stop shopping for defense procurement. The DIA, Doug Guzman and his team will do the negotiation, the total business case for the procurement. So all the SMEs, they have one phone number to call, essentially, and we can do what we can to help. If we have the authority to help, great. If it's something that we don't have the authority to do, or we can help them with, we can help find out what to do. And I'll give you one quick example. We will never have the authority or the ability to grant export permits. That's a GAC. That's a global affairs function. But it's important and it matters to us because I got a KPI to increase defense exports by 50%. So small businesses go through the process, they go to GAC, but guess what? We can also help advocate for them from inside to make sure that, there's tons of files, there's lots of things happening, just to make sure nothing gets lost in the process and we can get these companies export permits, as an example. So one-stop shopping, this is what everybody in this room that was on that committee in 2024 wanted. They also wanted a single point of accountability. That was a supplementary opinion or position from the Conservatives on top of the the number of recommendations that the committee had, which everybody agreed to, and this is exactly what we're building. So I'm quite excited about it. You've got great feedback from the companies that were here. That's not us talking about it or, you know, tapping our own backs. The companies are quite happy with this. Can we do more? Can we go faster? I think we can, and we'll be able to do more when we build ourselves out in our final form.
Thank you, Mr. Fuhr. Monsieur Simard, back to you. 2.5 minutes.
Merci, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I will quickly come back to the aluminum question I was talking about, because in my riding, in my region of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, there was a $2 billion investment into a facility to go from one technology to another one, which gave them a great advantage, because we want to reap the biggest benefit, if you will, in our region. So this facility was set up, and they actually set up a committee to maximize the returns. They were asking equipment manufacturers to get ready in terms of what was coming down the line in terms of the needs of Rio Tinto. So similarly, we have the Bagotville base, which will have fighter aircraft, potentially F-35s. They will have to update their facilities. So I'm wondering if within your agency, will you have the same reflex of setting up a committee to maximize these benefits that would allow the people in the community around the Bagotville base so that they actually benefit from the investments, so that they get some services, so that people from Quebec and people from other parts of Canada are the ones offering these services. I'm just trying to understand how the agency will function, and I hope that you will have this sensitivity, and I hope you will coordinate and ask the people of the region to see what they can provide in terms of equipment, supply chain. Will the agency do something similar to this?
So just to close the loop on your aluminum, I'm very sensitive to that. I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm pleased when we have the official from ISED to see if there is some path to help maybe rejig the aluminum situation so that it's more viable given our current situation here with the tariffs. With regard to the broader picture, there literally is billions of dollars going into bases, and Bagotville's one of those bases. A lot of new infrastructure to provide is being built and provided for new aircraft. You know, there's new housing, there's water, there's sewer. So my assumption, I don't know this right now, is that many of the labor jobs that are, like there's billions of dollars worth of construction, my assumption is much of that labor is coming from that region, which is going to be very, very helpful to the people that live there.
Mais moi, ce que j'aimerais...
What I would like to know and learn from you is to have an assurance that the agency will have the sensitivity and think about prioritizing service providers that are from the region, local providers, at least that are from Quebec or from the rest of Canada. So will you have a similar mechanism, or will it be the cheapest option?
Can I
very quickly?
Very quickly. The answer is yes, and it's called the Buy Canadian policy, and it's going to be enforced. It's already being enforced, and it's for the exact reason we just talked about. We will be looking for materials, labor. Like it's going to be enforced, and for the reasons that you cited.
Thank you, Mr. Fuhr. Sir Anderson, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and all the questions will be through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Fuhr, Mr. Chair, you had mentioned several times, and I've heard this repeatedly, that the DIA is going to be a one-stop shop. I was wondering if you can supply us with a phone number to that.
Yeah, I think I gave you my phone number the other day.
No, not your phone number, the phone number to the DIA.
Yeah, I'm sure we can provide you a phone number that you can call, sure.
Okay, you can. Good. How many Canadian company contracts have actually been signed so far?
Do you have an answer for that one? Canadian contracts? Well, we've got one.
With Canadian companies?
Yeah, well, we've got Telesat MDA.
Do you know a number?
Well, I got to list them out. Telesat MDA, Colt Canada, Bombardier.
I don't want to waste 5 minutes here listing off these companies. Just give me a number. No number?
Half a dozen?
Okay. How many foreign contracts have been signed?
I don't know. Do you know the answer to that?
It's about the same number.
About the same. So about the same Canadian foreign countries. Okay, under Division 16, the minister can access up to $1 billion, and with that money can purchase equity in private companies, hire and fire boards of companies. Essentially, if you wanted to, or if the minister wanted to, they could simply buy a bunch of companies and call it procurement and Canadian source it. Can you name me, and you mentioned this, that this is standard procedure and it'll be reported back to Parliament and everything. In fact, it doesn't have to be reported back. Can you name a single comparable federal procurement authority that allows that sort of expenditure without any accountability whatsoever and without the duty to report back to Parliament?
Well, you just put some things together that make no sense.
Really?
We are completely accountable. I listed a whole bunch: Parliament, committees, PBO, the House of Commons, the Auditor General. We are accountable to all those things. You can haul us in here anytime you want. Nothing's changed there.
Well,
to your other question,
it was very hard to get you here, sir.
Actually, it wasn't. You asked me and I came.
Several times.
No, you asked me and I came. That's what happened.
Clause 32 allows the minister to exclude a company from the procurement on national security grounds without providing. Can you name another body in the Canadian government that allows that without simply excluding companies?
You're just kind of fabricating a bunch of things that you pulled out of the document.
No, sir, I'm asking you a question and you're not answering.
I don't have an answer for you, but I will say this, that the new financial tools, there are new financial tools in Division 16 of...
And what are they?
There's equity positions, there's loans, there's loan guarantees.
Exactly, and that goes to the first question.
Yeah, well, if you give me a second, I'd answer your question. I'd say there are a number of countries that have similar things. I believe the Brits, the U.S., NATO, Diana has a couple of things that are set up this way. I know what you're driving at. You're trying to drive at that we're just going to have this unlimited amount of money that we just run around and do whatever we want.
Well, that's exactly what's going on.
Well, no, that's the way you're interpreting it, but that's not necessarily what's happening, Scott.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. The government frequently speaks about leveraging pension funds and private capital to support defense, and you yourself mentioned integrating industry a few minutes ago. What role do organizations like Brookfield and other institutional investors anticipate having in projects that are administered through the DIA?
I think you'd have to talk to them. How would I even know that?
Well, you're the one that's allowing it to happen, sir.
It hasn't happened, Scott.
No, it's not. It hasn't happened. I'm asking you what safeguards are there? Like, what sort of involvement? Do you have a plan to go forward, is what I'm asking.
Well, we're going to look at, on a case-by-case basis, the opportunities that lay in front of the government.
So there's no metric to govern this?
First of all, it's a public service that does this. It's not me personally, right? So the public service will look at the...
So it's not your file?
It's my file, Scott.
Okay. The bill creates 13 separate exceptions to competitive procurement. Can you identify a single major defense procurement failure in Canada that occurred because they didn't have access to enough exemptions, to enough sole source exemptions?
What I said to Mr. Bazan before was that the government of Canada has always had the ability to sole source. They've always had the ability to use a national security exemption. And probably the biggest example of a mix-up or a mess-up on a sole source was the F-35 that the previous Harper government tried to do. In fact, they were held in contempt of Parliament for trying to do it.
Okay, I don't think that's how that went. The bill gives the minister authority to acquire shares in corporation influence corporate government. Under what circumstances does the government believe it should become an owner of private defense companies?
I think that you would have to ask the CEO of the investment agency when that becomes an issue. I can't speculate what may or may not happen in the future.
That's it?
I appreciate that. Mr. Earl, over to you now for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I want to say that at this committee, we often hear from, primarily from industry witnesses that talk about the importance of the build, partner, buy pillars within the defense industry strategy, as well as the need for close cooperation among government, industry, and the Canadian Armed Forces. I know the Secretary's got great experience as a former SME. I think we did business together in the past, but more importantly, the Secretary has great knowledge of what the strategy means. So I want to ask, how do the strategy and how it's put together strengthen the relationship between those pillars and the those contributing to a more effective procurement process, making it more efficient?
Well, I think communication is a big one. I mean, I've talked to so many companies that just either couldn't didn't know where to go, didn't know who to talk to, and just were burnt out with trying to deal with the machine. I'll just refer to it as a machine. So they missed out on opportunities. So if someone is interested in defense procurement and they put any kind of effort into it, they're going to get someone in our department that will help them.
Thank you. Continuing on, looking at SMEs, how will this help create long-term certainty for Canadian defense companies who are seeking to invest in facilities, technology, and most importantly, as you alluded to earlier, into our skilled workers?
Well, there's a number of programs out there to help workers that are unrelated to this that we've been talking that the government of Canada is doing. Having companies basically will invest in themselves and get out over their skis if they know what's coming. You skate to where the puck's going. If you don't do that, you're going to be playing catch up all the time. So as I had mentioned before, sovereign capability that's in this document, specifically the defense investment plan and the defense policy, they still exist. Those documents are out there. Give companies an idea of where the government of Canada will be investing. And then with some certainty, because certainty is what's helpful for business, uncertainty is not, is by saying, hey, listen, we are going to be serious about build, partner, buy. That's us, the DIA. And then the Buy Canada policy, which is a PSPC policy. Between those two things, there's certainty built into it. And to go back to where the puck's going, between those three documents I just talked about, industry can start to see, where we're headed.
I've got about 2 minutes left. I know you know the aerospace and defense sector very well, and you know the significant importance of teaming. And at Monday's committee, we talked about how important that was. Are there provisions into this, either intentional or otherwise, that will aid Canadian companies in such arrangements? Yes.
Yeah, well, I think a good example of that would be the strategic partnerships, is having companies come in early and manage more of the process. Let them figure out who the best, well, typically primes would do this anyways, but bringing companies, in this case for fighter lead-in training, CAE or MDA Telesat, in early in the process, they can figure out the most effective way for teaming. And they actually manage much more of the process than people, because they're closer to the issue than the government is.
Thank you. Chair, I'll cede my time.
You have 2 minutes. You good?
I'm good.
All right. With that, Mr. Bazan, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Fury, you said earlier when we were talking about SMEs that there's a one-stop phone number, one-stop shop phone number. What is that number? I know that in my conversations with SMEs, I'd love to know how to get a hold of DIA.
I'll check to see if there is a phone number. There certainly is an email address, and if there's a phone number, I will pass it to the committee. Okay,
because I think it's something that
I'm not too hard to get a hold of.
Yeah.
Trust
I won't
me,
be passing out your number, I can tell you that. But anyway, so with the Defense Investment Agency, as it relates to the Defense Industrial Strategy, what's the priority? Is it to meet the statement of requirements for each piece of kit that you're buying for the Canadian Armed Forces, or is it for the ITBs that you're coursing out of industry?
They're mutually reinforcing. We can do both. We just bought, here's a great example. We just went and bought HIMARS from the U.S., right? In this particular case, for that particular procurement, that was the quickest way to get the kit the military needed. And we just went and we did it. It's tough to answer that question because every single circumstance is different.
So with the HIMARS, that's a Lockheed Martin product. Have you talked to them about building, some of the renewables on that, such as the rockets themselves, using Canadian companies?
That's certainly something we could talk about. HIMARS is pretty mature. This is going back to another committee appearance that I had.
But it's also about surge capacity, right?
Yeah.
And you've got everybody that's using HIMARS, not just the States, not just us, and most of the NATO allies are using them, Ukraine's using them.
Ammo in general is an issue. So whether it be HIMARS, 155, small arms, 120, all that's an issue, and that's something Canada is very serious about getting into, not only for our own war stocks, but we can help out our neighbors.
So I know that the government was slow in signing the contracts for the 155 artillery shells. We only got that done in the last few months, even though We knew for the last 4 years that we were undersupplied and underproduced, and the increase that happened in the Canadian industry in 155 was all done through contracts with the United States, who signed contracts. We only just did it in February. So what about on the rocket side? We have rocket companies like Magellan.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Rockets now, it seemed like that was old technologies as we went to different higher end systems, but we can't throw $1 million missiles at $20,000 drones. That is not a sustainable position to be in. And I think the Brits have a laser-guided rocket, which is a fairly effective way to do it. And I tend to agree with you that Magellan used to build the CRB-7 for Canada, and they still have that capability in cold storage. And I'm going to be raising that with my colleagues to see if there's a need for us to get back into that business.
The 87,000 CRB-7s were donated to Ukraine.
Yeah, those were Canadian ones that we wrote off.
Yeah,
that was great.
Manitoba, by the way. So.
100%.
I just going through the Division 16 and of the BIA Part 2, and when you look at the changes that are being made to the Defense Production Act, there's changes in the definitions in Clause 307.
I think we're in the I used to chair this committee as well, and now I think everyone's been generous. But if you want me to come back on this,
you don't want to answer questions about the agency that you're currently.
I want to answer questions for which I was called to the committee, which is the DIS. If you want to have me back, I'm happy to come back.
We aren't going to get a chance to do this because this is being done through Finance Committee. This is our chance, and just explanations. Why in the definitions that it goes beyond now that. Residential communities is more than just military communities. Why is defense services and defense procurement goes to anything and doesn't necessarily refer to defense at all? And then you tie that in with financial assistance, and you can up to $1 billion that the minister will have the power to give up to $1 billion for loans to any person, advance payments to any persons, guaranteed repayment, provide loan insurance, credit insurance, grants and contributions to any person, which also means corporations. So is this just another scandal in the making where there won't be any accountability and we're talking about a green slush fund again, or
Mr. Watchorn's got the floor. Mr. Watchorn?
I don't know how this has anything to do with the defense industrial strategy that we're supposed to be talking about today.
Yes.
Thank you.
When you are making payments to any person and loans and guarantees, how is that to support the defense industrial strategy, or as it turns into another scam?
This more broadly, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, the agency now, the agency in the future, the department in the future is always held to account by the same net mechanisms that exist now for any other department. If Parliament, committees, Auditor General, PBO have an issue or are worried about something, they can haul whoever it is in the future, me or whoever that might be, in to talk about what they think has gone sideways.
Well, that's actually in contrary to Clause 29, which says the minister is not required to provide a person who has been excluded. Any reasons?
Time is long gone. Over to you, Mr. Watchorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the minister for being here, and thank you for the officials being here. I'd like to get back to more serious conversations about the defense industrial strategy, which we're here today to talk about. So I had the opportunity to see the defense industrial strategy in action. We had a wonderful announcement at L3 Harris about the maintenance of the CC-330 Huskies. We have the procurement of the Global 6500s. And I'd like to know, Minister, you must be talking to companies all over the country. You've been to CANSEC, you've been to all sorts of different countries since you started your mandate. What are companies telling you about the DIS? How is it working for them? Because all the witnesses we've heard today and over the last few weeks have just been saying it's great. So I'd like to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I did review the committees that appeared, before I showed up for the study, and I wasn't surprised. I mean, what I heard on Monday was very much what I'm hearing across. Those are very much Quebec or Eastern companies, but I've heard it all over the country. I've heard it in Atlantic Canada. I've heard it in the prairies. I've heard it in the north. I've heard it out in British Columbia. What we've done so far is remarkably better than what we had. There's no question about it. You could measure it any way you want. I think you'd hear the same thing. It is much, much better, and it will continue to get better. I think one thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned the L3. When we talked about supporting Canadian companies, we ran around and said Canadian companies, and that's true. But what we mean is economic benefit to Canada. So And foreign direct investment in Canada is actually at probably a 22, 23-year high, which is great. This is what we want. But we talk about economic benefit to Canada. So L3, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, those are examples of companies that have thousands of workers here in Canada. They, as long as they continue to invest in Canada, that's what we want. Whether it's a Canadian born and bred company or it's a foreign company that is driving economic growth in Canada, we're open to all of it. But to circle back to your question, I think everybody that I'm hearing from is quite happy with the direction we're headed.
And just to maybe get back to my colleague's point from the block, I was another announcement recently at New World Graphite. It was a mine in Saint-Michel-des-Saints, which actually is opening now, and they are going to be setting up a plant in Bécancour to do the primary transformation that we need to make sure that we have the graphite we need as a critical mineral for our defense industrial strategy, because it's one of the 10 minerals that was identified with the strategy itself. So I'd just like to know, going forward, what metrics are we going to use to determine whether the DIS is successful or not? How are we going to figure that out?
Well, there's a couple KPIs in the document. 70% acquisitions in Canada. That's what we're moving towards. 50% exports. There's I think a 240% increase in revenue for small to medium-sized businesses. There's a bunch of them in there. There's a 10-year window to get there. So, at the rate we're moving, I'm confident that we're going to get there. That's the important part. And again, I'll just say, and I was really, really glad to see that you got such positive feedback, because we're working super hard at making sure this works, because it really matters right now. Our economy, we need to find other things for Canadians to do, careers. Our auto industry is getting hammered. Softwood's getting hammered. Steel and aluminum's got massive pressure. So, whatever we can do to help, and it's not just defense, but major projects, Buy Canadian, Build Canada Homes. These are all pillars of how we're going to keep this economy running, and defense is going to do its fair share.
Mr. Fuhrer, Mr. Watchorn, thank you for appearing before us today. Very quickly.
Just that the Secretary of State had mentioned a couple times, we talked about the one-stop shop phone number for SMEs. I just asked that email and or phone number, 1-800 whatever it is, by Canada, whatever you want to call it, that number and email contact is sent to committee so that we can share that with SMEs that are asking us about this. And secondly, just for the record, the Defense Investment Agency is mentioned 20 times in the Defense Industrial Strategy, and that's why we have them here today as witnesses to talk about the Defense Investment Agency.
Mr. Fuhrer, thank you for being here today. If you could provide additional information, that would be helpful. In the meantime, we're going to suspend for a moment as we allow you an opportunity to leave, and we'll reschedule in just a second. resuming our meeting. Before we return to our new witnesses, we have to choose our vice chair to replace Mr. Savat Tremblay, who is no longer a member of this committee. And I'm going to turn it over to the clerk to take us through the election of a new vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Conformément à l'article 106.2 du règlement.
Pursuant to 106.2, the vice president needs to be a member of an official opposition party other than the official opposition. I'm now open to having recommendations.
Okay.
Madame Romanado.
Oui, bonjour.
Hello. I move that Ms. Normandin be elected as vice chair.
Merci. Il est...
Thank you. It is moved by Ms. Romanado that Christine Normando be elected second vice chair of the committee. I am now going to submit the motion to the committee. Is it the will of the committee to adopt the motion?
Okay.
Je déclare la motion adoptée.
So the motion is thus adopted, and Ms. Normandin is duly elected as second vice chair of the committee.
J'ai préféré me retirer. J'étais en...
I was in a conflict of interest, so I withdrew.
Well, we do welcome our new vice chair to the committee, and she's been on this committee in prior years, and she's a very a good member in those years, and we look forward to working with her as we go forward. Now we're going to proceed in our next round. And our return to the Defense Industrial Strategy. I welcome the following witnesses from the Department of Industry: Kendall Hembroff, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister of the Industry Sector. From the Department of National Defense, Dr. Kate Kaminska, the Director General, Borealis Joint Program Office, Defense Research and Development Canada. Wendy Hadwin, our Assistant Deputy Minister, Policy and Industry. And on the remaining of the first hour, we've already have spoken with regards to them. So I will proceed with the opening statements of up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's all right with you, Kate and I are sharing the national defense remarks, and then I'm passing to Kendall, 5 minutes each.
Perfect. Please proceed.
Thank you so much for welcoming me back to this committee. As part of your ongoing study into the Defense Industrial Strategy, I'm pleased to share my opening remarks with my colleague, Dr. Kate Kaminska. Au fil de l'an dernier, le Canada a investi.
Over the past year, Canada has invested $65 billion in defense and security, as you know. In March of this year, we reached the 2% threshold for NATO defense spending, and we are now on track to meet NATO's new target of 3.5% of GDP.
To reach the ambitious target, the mobilization and engagement of Canada's defense industrial base is needed, and the Defense Industrial Strategy sets our path. Clearly, as we turn to implementation, we are focused on the sovereign capabilities, which represent areas where we have industrial capacity, operational requirements, and an export potential. As the Minister of Defense said last month, the Defense Industrial Strategy is a unified national effort. At its core, it's about strengthening our sovereignty and building a more resilient, innovative, and secure economy for Canadians. Above all, it's about delivering for the members of the CAF, the Coast Guard, who serve our country every day. The work will help Canada gain greater strategic autonomy and reduce our vulnerabilities to international pressures and threats. As we proceed with implementation, we are starting to see some positive impacts and early results. For example, last week, the Department of National Defense and the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine signed an arrangement to support the production of Ukrainian uncrewed aerial systems in Canada. The arrangement establishes a new partnership, Aerologic Sentinel, between a Ukrainian defense technology company and a Canadian manufacturer of uncrewed aerial systems. We hope that with the support of our two governments The partnership will combine the company's expertise to manufacture Ukrainian drone systems in Canada for the armed forces of Ukraine, and we hope also for Canada's armed forces. I would also note that on the 30th of April, the Minister of Natural Resources, Minister Hodgson, au nom du ministre de la Défense nationale, a annoncé que
the minister announced that the government of Canada was going forward with an initial investment of $40 million in order to assess the potential of using a controlled microreactor so that the Canadian Armed Forces can rely on this capacity during their activities in remote areas.
Turn to Dr. Kate Kaminska for finishing our remarks on the part of national defense.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am pleased to be here to discuss the Bureau of Research, Engineering, and Advanced Leadership in Innovation and Science, better known as Borealis, and its role in strengthening Canada's defense innovation ecosystem. As the committee has heard from previous witnesses of this committee, Canada has world-class talent, cutting-edge research, and globally competitive firms. The challenge is ensuring that sovereign Canadian technologies can move more quickly from research and development into operational use in support of Canada's defense and security. Borealis was created as part of the Canada's Defense Industrial Strategy to help accelerate that transition. Its focus is on strengthening the pathways between research, development, testing, and operational adoption by better connecting government, industry, academia, and military end users around shared mission priorities. A key component of this effort is the development of the Defense Innovation Secure Hubs, or DISHs. These hubs provide secure environments where Canadian companies, researchers, and government can work together to design, prototype, test, and refine their technologies. In November 2025, a pilot maritime DISH was established in Halifax, focused on the undersea domain, and it includes technologies such as autonomous systems, advanced sensing, and AI-enabled analytics. The pilot has already supported collaborative testing and experimentation activities, which are helping Canadian companies evaluate and refine their technologies for defense purposes. Borealis is working closely with the IDEAS program to help accelerate the transition of promising Canadian technologies into operational use in support of the Canadian Army's Minerva initiative. The project is advancing practical, cost-effective, drone-based targeting and range-finding capabilities that have the potential to enhance battlefield awareness. In closing, Borealis represents an effort to strengthen Canada's ability to translate research excellence into operational capability. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Next 5 minutes, please.
As you know, Canada published its first defence industrial strategy in February this year. The release of the strategy serves as a historic first step, setting out a whole-of-government framework that will guide Canada's defence investments. Our focus is now on execution and delivering results for the Canadian Armed Forces and our allies, while ensuring that every dollar maximizes jobs, industries, and economic benefits for Canadians. ISED's role in developing the strategy was to ensure that we are leveraging the full breadth of Canada's economy through a comprehensive package of industrial policy measures, anchored within Canada's broader industrial strategy. As the federal government's home for industrial policy and one of the strategy's co-leading departments, ISED is playing a key role in implementing the DIS. Committee members will have seen that the strategy includes commitments to invest in Canadian research and innovation, with a focus on the 10 sovereign capabilities through a variety of different federal programs. This includes investments to accelerate cutting-edge defence and dual-use research and development, to anchor top Canadian quantum companies and talent, to bolster access to capital to support commercialization and scale-up, and to help integrate Canadian small and medium-sized businesses into defence supply chains, among others. Par exemple, cela inclut la plateforme défense de la Banque de développement.
For example, this includes the Business Development Bank of Canada's defense platform, which is providing up to $6 billion in financing, venture capital, and advisory services to help SMEs innovate and scale. As announced by the BDC earlier this year, the platform has deployed over $91 million in financing and recently made its first investment under its Strong North Venture Capital Fund to support stratospheric drone technology development. Programs such as Innovative Solutions Canada and the Strategic Response Fund are also playing an important role in advancing Canada's dual use and defense objectives. For example, since May 2025, Innovative Solutions Canada has worked with the Department of National Defence to deliver over $128 million to Canadian companies to advance the development, testing, and adoption of made-in-Canada defense, dual-use, and quantum solutions.
Recognition of the challenges that many companies face in navigating federal programming, the Defense Industrial Strategy also committed to establishing the launch of a new concierge service, which was officially launched at CANSEC last week. This service will build on ISED's existing expertise to support Canadian companies working on defense technologies linked to the sovereign capabilities by serving as a coordinated single window approach to navigating government programs, provincial partners, services, and export opportunities. The strategy also included a commitment to modernize Canada's industrial and technological benefits policy, or ITB policy. Updates to this policy were announced last week by the Prime Minister. In alignment with the Defence Industrial Strategy, these updates will maximize the economic and industrial benefits that we derive from procurement. Key changes to the ITB policy are designed to direct investments by contractors to areas that will have the greatest impact in creating a more dynamic, competitive, and resilient Canadian defence industrial base. This includes, among other things, enhanced incentives for working with and investing in small and scaling firms and leveraging Canadian supply chains, credits for strategic investments that will grow domestic production and IP transfer, and new multipliers for workforce development, including Indigenous training and development. And this is the current ISED function that Secretary of State Fuhr mentioned will be transferring over to the Defence Investment Agency later this summer. La stratégie établit également une vision pour
The strategy also sets out a vision for working differently with Canadian industry, and we have achieved some early results on this front. As announced by the Prime Minister at CANSEC, the government has published a new framework for strategic partnerships. The framework sets out how the government will work more closely with industry to advance key sovereign capabilities through more structured and sustained engagement aligned with our defense and security priorities. The Defense Investment Agency will lead in the identification of new strategic partners in collaboration with ISED and the Department of National Defence as opportunities arise.
Recognizes that strong returns on our investments will be critical. To this end, the strategy sets clear and ambitious targets to measure success. You want me to stop here? I can. I'm happy to answer any questions about the economic targets.
Thank you so much. Sorry to cut you off. We're going to start with our first round. We're going to go 5 minutes each, folks. And I'm going to start with Mr. Kimball. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our panel for their interesting information. Ms. Hadwin, sorry. You mentioned about the 3.5% goal of spending. What year was that for, if you could refresh my memory? 3.5% NATO GDP spending. 2030, thank you. And right now we're at, the government is self-reported to NATO 2% of spending. Are you aware that that is not verified by NATO? That's just self-reporting and NATO accepts that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the
Well, just
Mr.
the
Chair?
2% that we have, it's self-reported to NATO. They just say, oh, okay, yes, we accept that.
The reporting to NATO is consistent with the NATO standards and verified by NATO.
It meets all NATO standards. So in the NATO standard, it says that Coast Guards would be required to deploy to an operational theater, need to have that capability to be counted under that 2% spending, whereas our Coast Guard definitely is, we've heard under testimony, not capable. So I'm giving that as one example of not meeting the proper spending, and it's self-reporting to NATO. And in fact, I would refer to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, which is the global standard on determining government spending, and they've actually singled out Canada, saying that we've only actually spent 1.5% that has met the NATO spending requirement. So not only have we not met it by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute study, we've been singled out by them. So what makes up that other, and that's a lot of money, another 0.5% of our GDP that doesn't qualify as NATO spending, according to them?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I know you will have the Chief Financial Officer for National Defence here, likely for an estimates or some other appearance, and I might recommend that would be the person able to speak.
Is there anyone else in the panel that could explain where that 0.5% of Canada's GDP simply does not meet the requirements of NATO? No one. Okay. I'd like to move on to a different topic. We talked about maximizing spending and efficient spending of dollars for the defense investment strategy, and I think that's commendable. And we also want to get the right things that we need. However, testimony from industry leaders that we had here earlier in the committee, they said that there was no national security plan, or they agreed with me that with no national security plan and no national capability inventory, it makes it very difficult for them to work together and to determine what we need to purchase for Canada. So would you agree then that, just start from left to right, that we actually are missing a national security plan as an underpinning to determine what we need in terms of the proper equipment and capabilities that we wish to bring forward? So maybe Ms. Folks.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. As you know, establishing a national security plan would be under the purview of departments such as the Department of National Defence. Obviously, with international ramifications, Global Affairs Canada would likely play into such a strategy. I understand that we're here today to talk about the defense industrial strategy, and all I can say is that the build, partner, buy not only involves domestic focus, but also broadening our trade relationships, and when we must, buying from our trusted partners.
So thank you, and if I could very quickly then, a national security plan would look at things like cognitive warfare, pre-kinetic threats, coercive trade, election interference, organized crime. These are things that would determine the threats that Canada is facing. I see none of that in the defense investment strategy, and industry has pointed out that we need this in a national security plan to efficiently guide. So we can buy these tanks or these ships or those rifles, but if we don't know what it is that we need, it seems it does not seem to meet. And I don't know if anyone would agree, but as Ms. Hembroff said, you want to maximize the efficient spending of our money, and it seems without that underpinning, without assessing all these multiple threats that we face, it seems to be willy-nilly. Would anyone agree or disagree with that? And if you disagree, why?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll start, and also my colleague Kendall will likely add. We're currently operating with the Defence Policy Our North Strong and Free from 2024, which is pretty clear in its articulations of the threats that Canada faces.
Does it include some of those threats? Are they even addressed?
At a time.
Thank you.
I apologize. I will now move over to Ms. Laurie. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and to the witnesses for appearing. It's June and it's National Indigenous History Month, and of course, naturally, I'll be asking about Indigenous peoples. And I wonder if you could, each of the witnesses can share with us what government and industry can do to make sure that there's increased Indigenous opportunities. How can they take more opportunities to make sure that they are more engaged. I think we all know that there are challenges when it comes to increasing engagement of Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and I would love to hear from each of you about how we can make sure that there's an increased engagement from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit.
Go ahead. I suspect we will probably all have things to add, but I'll start and I'll try to be brief. The concierge service that I mentioned has just been recently launched, will be especially beneficial to SMEs, and I would certainly encourage Indigenous businesses to reach out. It is intended to help those companies pathfind through the federal system. The second thing that I'll mention when I talked about changes to the industrial and technological benefits policy is we introduced a brand new multiplier for workforce development, which is a 5 times multiplier, but we also increased the current multiplier that we have for Indigenous skills and training to 10 times, and that is the largest multiplier that we actually have under the ITB policy in recognition of the importance.
Thank you for the question. The success of the Defense Industrial Strategy will definitely require working more closely and differently with Indigenous partners, particularly because Indigenous partnership in the defense industrial base will position us well for the activities that we have planned for the North. I can speak about the Northern Operational Support Hubs, which will establish a dispersed network of principal hubs and secondary nodes to provide critical infrastructure and logistical support for military operations in the North. There are regularly colleagues doing consultations in all communities and with rights holders and with organizations and delivery partners to make sure that everything we do is something we are doing in collaboration with communities. The Northern Operational Support Hubs emphasize collaboration with Indigenous partners, communities, regional governments to align the military operational requirements with shared regional priorities. Specifically, these concern dual-use infrastructure, airports, seaports, medical capacity, and alternative power generation. The Northern Operational Support Hubs will not only strengthen Canada's defence posture, but also enhance community well-being, resilience, and economic opportunity.
And if I may add, Mr. Chair, to what my colleague was saying, certainly from the perspective of Borealis, we are very interested in ensuring that we leverage Indigenous knowledge, and increasingly as we move towards working in the Arctic and the North as a strategic area of interest for national defense, we're making sure that when we do consult and we do source our the best and the brightest innovators from across the country, we include, of course, the Indigenous communities in that. And we've been very intentional with our outreach activities. For example, we held an industry day for Borealis earlier this year. And we made sure to reach out to Indigenous organizations and participants to ensure that they also had the opportunity to participate and hear what we had to offer and hopefully see themselves in the types of research priorities that we see for Borealis going forward.
Okay, excellent. If I could just maybe ask Wendy to remind us, in Nunavut, I know that there was huge excitement about the announcements for which communities were selected for NASH and nodes. Which communities, can you list them off for us, please?
Mr. Chair, can I take this question on notice and return?
Sure.
In writing?
Okay, thank you.
And with that, we will proceed to our next question from Monsieur Samard.
Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Well, this discussion has been quite interesting. You talked about Borealis. I mean, it is something we have at Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. I don't know if you have the copyright on the name, but we're not going to insist too much on that either. So I would like to go back to something that I think is very, very important, that brings the different strategies together. It's been 7 or 8 months now that the federal government has announced an electrification strategy. They announced a critical mineral strategy. Today we saw the report from the Forestry Industry Task Force. So all of these strategies exist to create industrial clusters. And all of these great strategies, they offer the option of having contracts with the armed forces for significant revenues. So, but how do you bring everything together? In my riding, there are companies that have very interesting solutions that are bringing different domains together. But I'm trying to link them with parliamentary secretaries or ministers, but to end up with something very concrete, I think we are still very far off the mark. Now, this is not a trick question. I'm not trying to make any of you look bad. I would like to know if you have a strategy to bring and link everything together, because there are solutions in each of the strategies I talked about that are quite interesting if you want to create clusters, industrial clusters, that will then feed into the military technology. So how do you see this?
Veux-tu commencer?
Merci. Thank you for the question. Well, of course, it's very important. The defense industrial strategy is an important paradigm shift. We used to be focused on best value. In DIA, today, we are really putting the spotlight on the ITBs, industrial and technological benefits. Now, we need to do many things. Of course, we need to have a certain structure for our contracts and make sure that we're capturing the value. And secondly, we need to know what's available to bring these links together, if you will. That is why many of our colleagues are here around the table today. We have already started this work, and we are quickly expanding our knowledge of the industry to bring these links together. When you get together with different providers, especially with Canadian providers, but also when you build partnerships, such as the one with Saab that the Secretary of State was talking about, so they're not always aware of what capacities exist. So we need to guide them and let them know what's available. So there's part of the work is really about helping the major providers know what Canada can do, can offer. So what we can offer to these large multinationals. Thank you, Mr. Robitaille. So you touched upon something that I think is very important. I don't know if this will be part of the report, but I will give you a very concrete example. There's a company that we have been talking with at the Natural Resources Committee. They're called Idea Control. They are storing energy. They have solutions to store energy to reduce the use of diesel in the north. Now, I'm not an engineer myself, but people are saying that that's a game changer for the industry. So we're talking with this company, and we're trying to see how we can link them up with someone from the DIA. And that's where, for a politician, it gets difficult. It becomes a challenge. How do we bridge these two? So for politicians, for entrepreneurs who are in this situation, the system isn't very user-friendly. It's hard to make oneself known. There are so many steps of validation on your end. So I think that is a step that doesn't really fully exist.
Let's start with the concierge.
Mr. Chair, maybe I can just briefly mention, given the mandate of my department, I mean, we regularly meet with companies in a number of different sectors that we would consider to be dual use, so not sectors that have been traditionally associated with defense. And I mean, that includes as you mentioned, companies in areas like energy storage, other clean technologies, critical minerals, steel and aluminum. I know there was a question earlier on aluminum, medical countermeasures. I mean, these are all areas that we are trying to leverage as part of our building up of a defense industrial base. And so, I mean, we are more than happy to meet with companies in those areas. We work very closely with the defense investment agencies as well as with the Department of National Defense in order to be able to try to help companies navigate this. And the concierge service will be an important tool to be able to do that on a go-forward basis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Anderson.
Can anybody tell me how many scientists work at Borealis full-time?
We currently have 25 people working in Borealis. We started at 2, so we've been growing very quickly.
Thank you very much. And can you tell me the same question for DRDC?
We're 1,600 people in DRDC.
1,600 scientists?
Not all scientists, but about 900 or so technical and scientific staff. 900,
okay. Can you tell me how many bureaucrats work at Borealis? Non-scientists.
Actually, our workforce is primarily scientists. I am a scientist myself.
Right.
I'm a physicist, and I lead the team. So we are a primarily scientific workforce. We also employ engineers, a few policy analysts, but they actually, interestingly, also have normally a technical background.
Okay. And DRDC, same thing?
So as mentioned, 900 research and technical staff. Okay. We have support staff, of course, that for example, supports the laboratories and maintenance of infrastructure, which I would also consider technical. And then there's, of course, some corporate functions as well.
Thank you very much. When evaluating major procurements, and this question, I guess, would be for Mr. Robichaud. When evaluating major procurements, what weighting is assigned to military capability, cost, delivery schedule, industrial benefits, Canadian content, and so on?
Those are considerations that are part of every procurement. The exact weighting depends on the on the specific requirements that we have.
Okay, so in this case, it would reside with the minister or the CEO.
Well, it's typically done collaboratively with our partners from National Defense and the CAF.
Right, but who makes a decision? Who establishes the metric you're going to use on each procurement problem?
Yeah, well, ultimately, the Defense Investment Agency as the procurement authority, as the final say. But but I must say, this is done very collaboratively. With our colleagues from National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces, and in cases with our friends from ISA.
Okay, I wanted to clear up something here. The minister or the CEO or somebody in that department has the ability to use $1 billion without reporting to Parliament before it's spent. Is that correct? Is there any mechanism in DIS that forces the minister to report prior to spending money?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the legislation that's currently in second reading, that is there. I think so. I'll let in due course the expert speaks to this when it's done. But at an high level, there are many Crown Corporation agencies that have the ability to invest.
No, sir, I'm talking about this one here, and I'm asking if there is a mechanism in the DIS that in the legislation that forces the minister to report prior to spending money.
Yeah, well, those important transactions would be part of any departmental reporting.
Is that a yes or a no?
Well, I think I've answered the question.
Okay, I don't actually have the answer. I still don't know if the minister has to report that before spending money.
So again, we're talking about a legislation that's currently in study, but as the minister said, it's going to be subject to all the departmental planning and reporting. And that would include any investment activities.
Okay, so there is no metric then that's set up for these things, or there's no metric that can be slid around. It's just a lot of collaboration.
Again, we're talking about things that are into consideration at this point. So in due course, if the legislation is adopted, departmental plans, will describe those activities and how they're going to be managed.
Okay. I'm going to turn my rest of my questions over to my colleague here.
Thank
Thank you. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair? Perfect. Mr. Brownlow, you called the Defense Industrial Strategy Agency's North Star. A North Star tells you which way to steer. So could you tell the committee what current published threat assessment is the strategy anchored to?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I did make that statement. I believe I made that statement at DefSec West conference as part of a panel, actually, with some of my colleagues that are here today. I made the statement in the context of it will drive how we implement build, partner, buy as a framework, and how that framework will drive the procurement strategy considerations that ADM Robitaille and his team will.
So was there any threat assessment? And I listed a whole bunch of them: cognitive warfare, pure kinetic threat, pre-kinetic threats, coercive trade, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not steering. We're steering towards the North Star without any guidance on these threats. It was just purely figurative, I guess, or I'm still at a loss. We don't even have a document.
Mr. Kibble, we're at a loss of time.
There. Yeah,
I'm so sorry. So we're now over to Ms. Lapointe.
Thank you, Chair. Madame Hadwin, Sudbury has a strong cluster of companies involved in mining technology, automation, advanced manufacturing, engineering, and critical minerals. And many of those capabilities have potential defense applications, so dual-use technology. As the defense industrial strategy is implemented, where do you see opportunities for regions like Northern Ontario to contribute to Canada's defense industrial base?
Thank you for the question. There is a chapter in the defense industrial strategy on supply chain, which in some measure also answers la question de Monsieur Simard. But also I can expect Kendall will want to add to this. But as we begin to unpack the sovereign capabilities and we look at what does it mean to build, partner, buy, in order to deliver an advantage for the Canadian Armed Forces or an industrial advantage, we do notice that a lot of material science is coming to bear to give us the chance to do experimental things, for example, or to try and marry up the needs of the armed forces with the production capabilities of industry. I would take the opportunity to just highlight that we have already announced and stockpiled scandium and graphite. Those were the first two examples of some work that we did together with NRCan on the critical mineral strategy implementation, but lined up very much with the defense industrial strategy. As you know, in NATO, we are mapping the supply chain. We've agreed a project at NATO last year at the summit, and I would expect some more work to come out this year at the NATO summit. Altogether, this amounts to reducing our dependence on foreign suppliers and doing more to increase our resilience with respect to our own supply chain. This work is just starting, and I can see it going in big directions. Kendall?
Maybe just one quick comment. Defense is actually a somewhat unique sector in that there are opportunities and capabilities across the entire country. And certainly our objective is to make sure that when we grow the defense industrial base that we're doing it in a way that includes regional considerations. I will say in the 3 short months since the strategy has come out, the government, through a range of different programs, has invested directly in a number of companies across the country, over 500 to date. I don't unfortunately have a full breakdown regionally, but if there's interest, we could provide that at a later date.
Thank you. Madame Folks, small and medium-sized businesses often tell us that federal procurement can seem complex and difficult to navigate, particularly if they have never worked with government or with the defense sector before. As the defense industrial strategy is implemented, what changes should companies expect to see that will make participation in defense procurement easier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So as my colleague from Innovation Science and Economic Development mentioned, it's going to be very important to have this concierge service It's going to provide really the support that small and medium enterprises, and I would even say micro businesses, need in those innovative sectors, whether it's defense, security, dual use, to understand how to navigate the federal procurement system, where to go first. The other thing is, within our strategic partnerships, when we identify a strategic partner, we expect them to work collaboratively with the Government of Canada to help small and medium enterprises and micro businesses in Canada get into the supply chain. So within PSPC, as you know, we've implemented the Buy Canadian policy, which prioritizes Canadian companies in federal procurement. But beyond that, we also have Indigenous participation plans, which is another avenue to get small and medium enterprises that are also Indigenous into the supply chains. And we expect our strategic partners to integrate as many Canadian enterprises into their supply chains as is practical to deliver the capability to the CAF on time and on budget. Thanks.
Okay. And Madame Folks, businesses are also interested in predictability. So looking ahead, what improvements are being made to procurement processes to reduce the delays, and what should companies realistically expect in terms of timelines from identifying an opportunity to participating in a project?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think both ADM Robitaille and myself are excited to answer this question. So one of the things I think, just to be very frank with the committee, is moving towards 2% and then 3.5% of defense spending, of GDP, of defense spending, and then to 5% of GDP for defense spending will really help with sending those long-term demand signals to Canadian industry. It will also help accelerate procurement. We've seen some procurements that have not had funding allocated in the early days of those procurements, whether it's in identification phase within the Department of National Defense or options analysis, and we haven't been able to advance the projects or move to contract award. Now, with sufficient funding, particularly when expenditure authority and contracting authority are granted quickly, we'll be able to move quickly to the procurement phase. And the new authorities that the Defense Investment Agency will have will also help accelerate that. So I'll turn it over to ADM Robitaille to provide further response to this question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Monsieur Savard, sorry.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now, since we have people from ISED, I'm going to go back to a question I previously asked to the minister. He was talking about reorienting aluminum production. Now, I sometimes feel that there is sometimes a bit of a misunderstanding on that because it's quite particular. So there's primary production, and then you end up with ingots of aluminum. And then there's also secondary processing where you extrude and shape the aluminum into different shapes. And you need a specific bit of machinery to create aluminum sheet as well. But in processing of aluminum, we are actually very weak. We don't have these facilities to produce sheet aluminum. So therefore, it ends up being a bit of a pious wish if you don't have this capacity. And this capacity is about $2 billion if you want to have this kind of a facility to create aluminum sheet. And we talk about using aluminum in Canadian applications, but we have to be mindful of the ecosystem we have. And I'm not criticizing here, but sometimes I feel like we're not really fully aware of the aluminum ecosystem we have. We are great. We are big producers, but we export to the U.S., unfortunately, who end up getting more value out of it. And I lived that in my riding of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean for the past 30 years. My father tells me all these stories about aluminum processing, but I don't think that's achievable in the short term. I was wondering if you are aware and if you have a strategy.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that my department is working very closely with aluminum producers in the country, both primary and secondary. I would say that we are aware that tariffs have had different impacts on those two segments, in part because of traditional U.S. reliance on Canadian aluminum. But the impact of tariffs over time is also having a fairly significant impact. The Secretary of State had talked about Buy Canada as an important policy measure designed to support aluminum producers in addition to other sectors. I can also mention the Strategic Response Fund, which was announced by the government with a very clear focus on helping those companies and sectors that are most exposed to tariffs, and that does include the Canadian aluminum sector. We engage very regularly with aluminum producers. We have actually announced one project under that program already involving Rio Tinto, the Ulysses project, just last month. We have more that we are evaluating now actively, but we're very much seized of the challenges facing that sector.
Oui, s'il me reste un petit peu de temps.
If I have some time left, well, yes, you announced $100 million for carbon neutral aluminum production in my region. Now, people are not really after primary aluminum producers because they can push it to the next person if you want. The consumers in the U.S., they don't really have a choice, and prices are skyrocketing, $6,000 per ton of aluminum. We've never seen that. But what people are after are processing capabilities, and unfortunately, we are captive to the American market as long as we're not able to do more processing here. So I don't think it's by investing. Now, I'm happy, of course, with the investment of $100 million in primary producers, but it's not via that you will improve the cluster. So I'm not going to push it any further. I will stop here.
Ms. Cheryl-Gallant, over to you for 5 minutes.
And through you, Mr. Chair, why does the DIA want the ability to invest in non-military housing communities per C-31?
So thank you. I think this again refers to the legislation that's currently under consideration. So as I've mentioned, and maybe I can clarify the answer that I provided. The DIA will be subject to the same reporting and planning requirement as any department. So the use of those authorities would be part of its planning.
I just want to know what they're using them for. Like, why would DIA have to invest in that? I just don't understand what the rationale would be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on when you look at, depending on the project, then you can see, in a case by case. We want to, you don't want to wait until there is an emergency requirement to ask for.
Well, there's already an emergency requirement for housing, but why does the DIA want the ability to purchase shares in public or private corporations?
Yeah. So, depending on, I will give an example that RCO has been using. Sometimes, Canada needs to make a significant investment in a technology or a company to serve the needs of the Canadian forces, and it may be taking a lot of risk in developing that said technology. So, having the ability to invest in equity, for example, allows Canada to also share the upside, so the return on that investment. So that would be a more sophisticated way of supporting the industry, providing capital to make those investments, but in a way where taxpayers can reap the reward of that investment.
Okay, so it's de-risking it. Okay, so presently, other than scrambling fighter jets when incursions into our airspace is detected, Canada has no air defense. Could you please list the air defense procurements for which contracts have been signed, the price of each contract, and the corresponding delivery dates for use in Canada, not Latvia?
I think, at this moment, the Defense Investment Agency has a small portfolio of contract. It includes some projects like ground-based air defense that are currently under procurement. That we have, but we have not, as of yet, awarded a specific contract for that.
So the ground-based air defense is not for Canada, though? Not for use in Canada?
Yeah. My apologies?
The ground-based air defense is not for use in Canada?
Yeah, the first phase is for use to protect our presence in Latvia.
Okay, so And there is a NATO recommendation for all allies to reduce the size of SORs. What has your department done to shrink the SORs to speed up the procurement time?
Yes. Well, actually, this is like an important priority. This is what we've done for like the submarine procurement, and we're doing also this by selecting like strategic partners. Like the main approach that we're using is to go by what I would call like selective tendering. So identifying like or companies or organizations that we know are able to deliver what we need, like either through a pre-qualification process or through the understanding of the market. For example, Canadian companies that can do it. So when you know that the companies can actually deliver, they have a proven product or they are on the way, then you do not need to have the same complexity of statement of requirement. Like now, it's still important to do this work well because it's a contractual relationship and we need to get to confirm that we'll get the value for Canadians. But by by starting from like a trusted source of suppliers list, we're able to simplify this significantly.
Well, the situation is that we're trying to allow more SMEs to compete and get the new businesses and then get them off in upscale and hyperscale. Would you please provide us with the values of each contract that is currently in place? So you said about a dozen, and the expected dates of delivery.
Yeah. So on the contract that was already in place, I would defer, and if there's a question from the committee, would be pleased to provide this. But I'm not in I don't have them in front of me to provide you the answer right now.
Okay. So would you please provide those to the committee at a future date as soon as you have them, so that we can develop the timeline for when things are coming in and how they're going to fit into this actual keeping our promise of the 5% by 2035 for NATO. Okay. What is being done specifically to promote the robotization, the robotics in Canada, and to speed up the cyber products that we have for weaponization?
Yeah, for the robotics. So at this point, I think like we have the legislation that is front of the house to make the agency like a department. So right now we have we have a small portfolio of projects that do not include like specific robotization at this point.
So
that concludes, Mrs. Gallant. Okay, thank you. Mr. Reminato, over to you for the last 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here and for their patience today. Before I start asking questions of the witnesses, I just wanted to make an offer to my colleagues across the way. For my conservative friends, they were looking for the coordinates of the DIA. If they Google it, they can find the email. And with respect to the NATO expenditures, on page 4 of the NATO a press release issued in April, they identify all of the countries that have met the 2% target. So it's out there at NATO actually provided that press release back in April, identifying Canada as having met that 2% target. Pour mon collègue du Bloc Québec.
For our colleague from the Bloc, you had questions about how we can work together. Well, you're lucky because you have the Parliamentary Secretary for Defense who is also from Quebec. So I'd be happy to sit down to have a conversation with you and see how we can work in your riding.
I think there's some confusion here in terms of how we came about to where we came in terms of defense industrial strategy. So I just want to map it out here. So in 2017, we brought forward I believe it was after 20 years, the first defense strategy in terms of strong, secure, engaged. We provided an update in 2024 with ONSAF, our North, Strong, and Free, which fed into a defense industrial strategy. And of course, we all know how this works, is that the Canadian Armed Forces identifies the needs that they have based on threat assessments. They don't just come out and say, I need widgets. They have a need for something based on threat assessments that are constantly being undertaken. And at that point, they then provide that statement of requirements to National Defense, who works now with the Defense Industrial Agency in terms of getting those widgets or whatever it is that they are in need of. So my question, I believe, is going to be for the ADM in terms of how we work. And again, while we're talking a lot about the defense industrial strategy and how that is going to help revolutionize our industrial base in terms of defense, my focus is always on making sure that the brave men and women in uniform have what they need. And I know that historically we haven't been able to get them what they need in a timely fashion. So I wanted the ADM, if she can walk us through a little bit about how we're working together with ISED, with the DIA, in terms of making sure that we get the brave men and women in uniform what they need when they need it, and how they are going to be able to engage with industry to make sure that we're buying from Canada. If we're going to buy, let's eat our own cookies, right?
Thank you so much for the question. As you described, when we began looking at the ingredients of a defense industrial strategy for Canada, we listened to as many industries as were willing to talk to us. And that surfaced up many challenges, and one of them is that we do not communicate our demand signal very clearly as a Department of National Defense. There are outlooks, there are blueprints, but most industries struggle to understand exactly what it is that they might have that we might need. This led us to focus on the articulation of sovereign capabilities in the document. There are 10. They unpack into 31 specific things. Capabilities that get to the heart of electronic warfare, at the heart of the challenges that confront the Canadian Armed Forces and the Coast Guard today. We did not develop those things in isolation. We worked very closely with everybody who is on the witness table here today and others from Global Affairs Canada with respect to export controls and also export opportunities. With Natural Resources Canada because of the importance of supply chains, not just critical minerals, but also energy and forestry. And ultimately, all the tools of government are now orienting towards helping us deliver on a defense demand signal. We know that there is an opportunity to provide more detail, that where it says digital systems, and even when they unpack into quantum computing, there is room for us to be more clear about what exactly we need and how we intend to inject Canadian raw materials and Canadian small and medium-sized businesses into the supply chain for what it is that we might develop. If we get this right, we have the opportunity to build on a whole lot of leading-edge capability in Canada to provide the Canadian Armed Forces an operational gift, something that will be an advantage for them in a military context, but also that will give us an industrial advantage that allows us to compete on the global scale as many countries are busy investing in rearmament and their armed forces. There is one area in particular that stands out, although all of the 10 sovereign capabilities will seek to have this connection. And I want to pass to Kendall, who can speak about how her programs are oriented to support. But one area I might highlight is medical countermeasures. The Surgeon General of the Canadian Armed Forces, I will not say more.
No, I'm sorry, but time has passed. I do want to thank the witnesses for being here. We have some housekeeping to do. I have a few things, so you're free to leave, and I'm going to proceed with 3 items, if I may.
We are past our time.
I have 3 items that I want to get through really quickly. Oh, no. I will. Then we'll do it very quickly. Is it agreed, this is in regard to the study of the contaminated sites for DND and the CAF, is it agreed to provide the recommendations for a report before June 12th? Friday at 4 p.m.? No? No. Okay. You want more time? Yes. For that?
Silly season here. We've had the 19th. 31 we're dealing with.
How about what date? Is the 19th okay?
The following week.
Okay.
It's the following Friday.
Fine. Is it agreed that the evidence and documentation received by the committee during the first session of the 44th Parliament on the subject be taken into consideration by the committee in the current session? Right?
On the contaminated sites.
Contaminated sites. We've already closed the contaminated sites, right? So no more submissions.
No more submission, but the study was started in the 44th Parliament, and so.
Okay. All in agreement? And for the study of the Francophones and Indigenous, is it agreed to provide the recommendations for a report before February 12th, the 19th? 19th. All in favor? And on Monday, A number of people are wanting to go to the GG. I'm looking for consensus for those that wish. I understand. So some will have to determine, but who from the opposition are going to the GG's event?
Instead of committee?
Well, I'm putting it out there. People are asking.
Mr. Chair.
I'm just looking for
Mr.
consent.
Chair.
I'm looking for, yes, Madam Sherry.
Mr. Chair, may I ask that the members please put their microphone on because I can't hear. I would have liked to have been there, but I can't be.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
I don't see consensus on that issue. Is that what you're telling me? So, yes.
So, Mr. Chair, if you wish to give up a meeting that we're supposed to start looking at the draft report and push that back until Wednesday, and if we don't get through it and get her done before we rise the table in the House, that's on us. But if everybody feels it's more important to go see the GG get sworn in, fine, but I don't think any of us on our side were invited.
Okay, if there's nothing more.
Pardon.
Yes, Monsieur Samar.
Well, this might be a partisan thing, but I wouldn't prioritize the GG. I would opt for a meeting of the committee. I don't know if it's really necessary to cancel a committee meeting for the GG event. That's just my point of view.
Any further comments? And with that, this meeting is adjourned.